Okay, so this is Nothing Conversations, and today I have my guest, Tom Das. Hi, Tom.
Hi, how you doing, Leonard?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah, maybe let's start with, I don't know how your story unfolded as a seeker, because mine was, because if I can like tell you the sequence of how the story of being born in Catholic religion and then going through depression and anxiety, psychotherapy, then the New Age spirituality, then the Neo Advaita, and then I don't know, and then right now I don't know how I got here, and I don't know how it unfolded for you. Maybe you can share. I would love
You don't
to
know how you got here?
no to I know this I can like in like the memory of how things unfolded, but the nitty gritty details of why I'm asking the questions I'm asking now. The how things was placed on the path. It's
Mm,
like it's like I don't know. I there are things that unfolded that I did not expect. And
of
things
course.
just suddenly suddenly became apparent, and then there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, same here. I mean, in a way, life's like that, isn't it? You might have a plan for what you want. You might have a plan for your life, or you might have a plan for your spiritual journey. But for most people, we very quickly find out, or maybe less quickly for some, we find out that God has his own plans, or life has her own plans, and we just go along for the ride. So I'm happy if you want to know a bit about my journey, my story. I'm happy to try and tell you some of it. The reason I say I'm happy to try and tell you is because same for me. It's a bit hazy in places. It's not something I think about very much. It's not something I tell people very much either. Apart from when I have these sorts of interviews, it's usually the first question, and I usually have to rack my brains and try and figure out a story to tell. Um, And every time I say it, it probably comes out slightly different with a few more details here and there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know when I started seeking, but I think it was fairly young. Um, and when I started seeking, I wouldn't have called it spiritual seeking. I was just interested and curious about life as a very young child. I remember being just interested in the sort of fundamental questions about life. Why am I here? What am I doing here? Why am I in this body? What's the point of it all? Um, why am I in this body and not somebody else's body? All these sorts of questions. And I was just a normal kid. This is when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. So very young. But I wasn't, a serious spiritual seeker. I was just curious about life. Um, but when I got a bit older in my teenage years, I started understanding about religion and philosophy and different ideas people had about life and the afterlife, and in some cases the before life too. And this got me thinking, and a lot of it didn't make sense to me. A lot of it I thought was nonsense. A lot of the religious things, religious beliefs, I just thought it was a lot of nonsense. But oh yeah, and throughout this time, I'd also been taught meditation, yoga, by my mother, and it was taught in a non-religious way. It was taught in a way that I was told, look, if you do this, this is going to help you physically, it's going to help you mentally, it's going to help you emotionally, it's going to help you with your studies, it's going to help your coordination, help you stay calm in times of stress. So I did yoga, meditation. I also did martial arts as well as a young child, again from about the age of 6. Um, and I didn't realize it was doing anything for me spiritually at the time. But in retrospect, looking back, I think it really helped me. It it helped me sort of with composure of mind. There was a meditative aspect to the martial art I did, Aikido. Aikido is a Japanese martial art, and yeah, it was a wonderful practice. So I was doing all that stuff, but my family from an Indian background. So I didn't realize it, but you're getting in, and we weren't a particularly religious family. But you're getting infused with all these different cultural ideas, Hindu ideas, Christian ideas, all these different ideas coming into me as well at the same time. And I was told that, about the Bhagavad Gita being a very holy book and things like this. So when I got older, I tried to read these things. I tried to read the Bhagavad Gita. I read the Bible, especially the New Testament and the Psalms and parts of the Old Testament too. And I found it really inspiring. But it didn't make sense. It didn't really make sense to me. And one thing that made a big difference to me was a book called, it was called Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga means the king of yogas. It's a type of yoga. It's a meditation-based form of yoga. And this was a compilation of a series of lectures by Swami Vivekananda, who is now fairly famous. He's fairly well known amongst spiritual types, spiritual seekers. Swami Vivekananda, he was alive in the 19th century and early 20th century. And he's one of the key people who brought Vedanta and Hindu thought over to the West. And his lectures are really inspiring to me, because this is the first time I really, in any comprehensive way, came across the idea that God or religion wasn't something you had to just believe in. God was something you could actually discover for yourself, or someone or something that you could somehow know for yourself. And this was the central thesis, the central thrust of what Swami Vivekananda was saying. He was saying that God isn't something you should. He used to say, don't ask me to believe God. I want to know God. And this really inspired me as a young child. I was a young teenager. And the second half of that book goes through Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is a sort of core yogic text. And Swami Vivekananda has given his commentary on those sutras. So again, I came across that fairly young, I guess, compared to a lot of people who are reading sutras, and I started, and it changed the way I did meditation. I tried to meditate in the way he recommended and things like this. So that's how it started for me. But from there, I started becoming interested in all sorts of different things, Buddhism, New Age stuff, J. Krishnamurti was a big influence on me. I read pretty much everything of J. Krishnamurti when I was a teenager. And every time we went to India to visit relatives as a child, we used to go to India every now and again to visit my relatives there. And I don't know if you know, but in India, the books are really cheap. And there are lots of spiritual books available. So I used to buy all the spiritual books, Vivekananda, Ramakrishna, or Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna. We used to buy all his books, Vivekananda's books, Krishnamurti, all these different books. And I used to come home, I used to have a bit of hand luggage that I used to carry in the airplane in my backpack, and half of it was just, I had a toothbrush in there and a few other essentials, and then half of it was just books. And gosh, so I used to read a lot and meditate and seek, and I used to try to talk to my friends about it as well. That didn't go too well, because most people just like, what on earth is Tom talking about? What is he talking about? So I felt very isolated in some ways, because I had no one really to talk about it with properly. There was actually a couple of people I could, but you could only go so far.
Yeah.
So that there was a bit of isolation there as well on the journey. But gosh, how am I doing? I don't want to take too long over this story, do I? I'll speed up a bit. But essentially, I explored lots of different things, various different Buddhist schools, Tibetan Buddhism, Dzogchen, Mahayana, Zen, Theravada, I explored Gnostic Christianity, various forms of Vedanta, which I still very much love to this day. A lot of these traditions I've got a lot of love for, a lot of affection for these traditions. But it changed. What changed for me was coming across the teachings of Ramana, who I consider to be my guru, Ramana Maharshi. And when I first came across his teachings, when I first came across him, I don't know if I told you before, but I didn't really think much of him at all. You know, I just thought he looked, you know, it just didn't inspire me, didn't speak to me. It just seemed a bit bland and uninteresting to me when I first came across Ramana's teachings. And I remember flipping through, you know, one of his books, and on the front cover it had a picture of him and a picture of Arunachala, the holy mountain. And these images are so inspiring to so many people, including myself now. But at the time, you know, I just saw it. It just meant nothing to me. It was just like, okay. And I remember putting the book back down on the bookshelf because I was in a bookstore. I remember where I saw it. It was in this yoga bookstore, and they used to sell all these yoga mats and everything, and they used to sell a selection of spiritual books, and you know, this was one of them. This Ramana Maharshi book, and I remember thinking, no, that's not for me, you know. But it was a couple of years later that I came across his teachings again, and I must have been in a different space, because I just found myself totally and utterly drawn to them. It was so different. And I guess that just shows you what timing can mean, you know, the timing of something. And of course, we're not in control of these things. You know, I would say, you know, Bhagwan controls it all. You know, Bhagwan meaning Ramana. And for me, Ramana is God. And Ramana is myself too. And Ramana is all. So it's just the way I express it. But so I started becoming very inspired by his teachings. I didn't really even like everything he'd wrote. When I read his teachings, I didn't even like what he was saying necessarily. Sometimes I think, oh, that doesn't sound very good, or that doesn't sound right. But I found myself just irresistibly drawn towards him. The way, his form, his appearance, the way he looked. I thought that I felt his presence. I feel his presence, and I felt drawn to his presence in his energy. There was a love that started to come up for him, and I started to fall in love with him, basically. And it felt totally natural. It felt totally natural, totally harmonious, totally falling in love with Ramana. And at the same time, my mind was kind of looking at this thinking, what the hell's going on? What is going on? What do you mean you're falling in love with someone? And at the same time, it felt so right, so natural. But the mind was like, this is really strange. You know, this is bizarre. What's going on, Tom? You know, you're not into gurus. You're not into this kind of stuff. You know, you're more of a cynic. I've always been quite cynical of teachings. That's probably why I kept on going through so many. You know, I was always finding holes. I was always finding holes in teachings. And I still do that. I still find holes in teachings. And but with Ramana, I found lots of holes, or what I thought were holes in his teaching. But I was just drawn to his teaching nonetheless, despite all the apparent flaws I could see. And as I was drawn more and more to his teachings, something changed in me energetically. Something changed in me, and the suffering over time, and I'm not sure how it happened or when it happened, that suffering basically went. The suffering was swept away. You know, and I say all thanks to Ramana, all thanks to grace, Guru's grace, all thanks to Ramana's grace. You know, do I know how it happened? I don't know. You know, I feel Ramana's presence now, but do I feel Ramana's presence? I don't know. But this is how I say it. This is how I say it. It's all because of Ramana's grace. This is my expression.
Yeah, Wow. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Ramana, one thing that I have in my heart, what Ramana Maharshi said was, if the if the desire for self-realization, or if the desire to find the truth is in your heart, something like that, even if you don't want it, it will happen. So, and those words have energy of whatever happens, it will happen. You don't have to force anything to happen, because if the desire is there, surely it will fall at the right time, and it will unfold perfectly. So and I really like everything you're saying, because a lot of people have, but of course it's just preference, but some, I think these people played roles to catalyze some pointers so that you can find the truth on your own. It's like, for me, it's Balsekar. Ramesh Balsekar played when his words, when he said you're not the doer, it takes a while, because I think that's one of the fetters that's hard to break, to realize that you're not the doer. But from that took away the guilt and the pride on this character, because I feel like if you're not the doer, you're just happy because you know that whatever's happening is under the will of God, under the will of divine grace, whatever is happening. Like, you're not constricted to controlling life anymore. Yeah, I also like your, in your website, tomdas.com, there's a line there that says practic, like, I don't know how I remember it. It's like the realization in, or how you apply it in practical living. I don't know if if you can
Yeah,
expound.
something like that, wasn't it? It was something about realization in practical realization in daily life or something like that. I don't even know what it says on there.
Yeah, because I think
You should know though. Hey, you're interviewing me. You're meant to have done your research, aren't you? Come on.
yeah, because I think
I don't even know. I don't even know what's on my website, so can't blame you for not knowing.
no, because I think, as much as this is just my take, the illusion is just the belief in the that you're the doer, and the belief in the separate self doing your life. But after the realization, life goes on. You still do the laundry, you still do day-to-day living, and it's not, I don't know, it's I find practical teachings very I don't know, I think it's important. I think it's important to not bypass life and turn it into another belief. Like, some people can just say life is an illusion, life is a dream, and then disregard the reality of I don't know, the reality of the day-to-day living. I don't know what's your take on it.
I mean, I don't. People can say whatever they want to say. I don't mind. Um, I know you're asking me what do I think about that topic. One thing I wanted to say before we get onto that is that just going back to my story
Yeah.
was that what happened to me also was that those teachings of Ramana's which I disagreed with,
Oh yeah.
and I thought I had found holes and flaws in, as I fell more and more in love with him, as he kind of pulled me towards him, um, and I realized he was in my heart, and he pulled me into my own heart, pulled me into him. I realized that that all his teachings are true. You know, the words that the teachings I thought didn't make sense or weren't true. I re, I realized the depth and truth of the verbal teachings. Does that make sense? So there were certain verbal teachings of his I didn't agree with, but I felt a love for him. But as his love pulled me in, and as the sense of ego or Tom got less and less, the verbal teachings, the words, that I didn't understand made sense as well. And I don't think I would have, before I would have just dismissed those teachings as being rubbish or silly, like I did a couple of years previously. But it was only because of my love for him that I didn't even choose that allowed me to sort of stay with him and stay with the teachings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's I guess it's beyond, you know, it's beyond words, or where you don't have to explain the nitty gritty. There's an unspoken understanding
There
beyond
is that.
words.
Yeah, there is that too. Yeah, there is that. What I meant though was that the teachings that he taught that I didn't agree with, I started to see the truth in them. But the only reason I started to see the truth in them is because of this, for me, because of this love for him that drew me towards him, and that sort of kept me with him. Even though I kind of, my mind had rejected some of the verbal teachings, the teachings, some of his teachings, I rejected them. I didn't agree with them. But because I had a love for him, I stayed with him, as it were. I stayed with his teachings. And then I was able to see the truth of his actual spoken teachings as well. Whereas prior to that, my mind had dismissed them.
Do you?
Because this goes back to your original question about the world being an illusion. There is a lot of truth to that world being illusion stuff too. You see, so it can come across as dismissing life. We've got this life around us, and to say it's an illusion can be quite dismissive. It's like, well, hang on a sec. This is my life. I can see it. I can touch it. I can feel it. I can breathe it in. How can you just dismiss it almost with the back of your hand, or with one fell swoop and say it's an illusion? This seems rather dismissive and maybe even unhealthy. But what I found is these teachings can have a potent, if it's not coming from the mind, if it's not just a conceptual view, oh, the world's an illusion, as a belief. If it's an expression coming from the heart of truth, there is a lot of potency in this. Because if you've truly seen through the doer, if you truly realize there's no doer, that's full liberation. It's not partial liberation. That's full liberation. That's not just a little awakening. But if you really see the depth of that, there's no doer. Because that means there's no separate me at all. At all. And when there's no separate me at all, the sense of the world being real also falls away. This is my experience. So you've got these two concepts that rise up kind of simultaneously. One is the belief that I am a real separate entity, or I am a body-mind entity, I'm a person, I'm a separate person. This is one belief. And then when this belief comes up, I'm a person, there's another belief that comes up, which is this world that I'm living in is real. It's a real world, and this life I have is real. So you have this belief, I'm a separate person, I'm a body-mind, living in a real world. These two beliefs come up together. And these two beliefs are like the core two beliefs of duality. In Vedanta, they call it, the belief I'm a separate person is called jiva. And the belief that the world is real is jagat. Jagat means world, jiva means person or a separate individual entity. And in Vedanta, they have a third entity as well. They say it's not just two beliefs, there's a third belief that comes in, which is God. If you believe that you're a separate person, then you believe you live in a real world. That's first belief is separate person. Second belief is I live in a real world. Third belief, and there is a higher power or a God that moves the world, that orchestrates the world. Maybe you can say it's a power if you're more scientifically minded, or maybe you can say God. In Sanskrit, they use the term Ishvara, to mean the deity or the God. It literally means ruler or Lord. You know how in Catholicism, in Christianity, we say Lord, don't we? Lord for God, Lord for Christ. Lord means a landowner. You know, you've got the lords of the people who own the lands. They're the rulers. They're the lords. So Ishvara also means Lord. It means God. So in Vedanta, these three concepts of, and this is all ignorance. This is all illusion. I believe I'm a separate person, number one, living in a real world, number two, and then there is a God external to me who ordains everything, or there is a higher power external to me who ordains everything. And this is why if you believe you're a separate entity, you can pray to a separate God and you can live in the world. But what not the non-dual teachings say, what Ramana says, what I share as well, is that these three appear, but they're illusory. They're not real. And that is a practical teaching. You said practical teaching. Has to be practical teaching. Practical teaching just means a teaching that works. That's all it means. It doesn't mean it will necessarily help you get a job. It doesn't mean it will necessarily help you earn money. But it's a teaching that works. And what does it claim to do? If it doesn't claim to get you a job and make you money, it claims to end suffering. It claims to end suffering. And that's what we really want. That is what we really want. You might say you want, you want enlightenment, or you might say, I want a better job, or I want more money. But what we really want is to be totally happy without any suffering. This is what our hearts desire. Everybody's looking for that. Some people call it freedom. Some people call it liberation. Some people search for immaterial things. But we're all seeking for that. If we believe we are a separate person, we'll always be seeking.
Yeah, I agree. It is my thing. The thing about that is, if there's no separate doer, then suffering ends. Because you know that you're one with life. Like there's no separate that there's really no separation. I guess my next question is, why is it a difficult fetter to break? Because I see a lot of debates, the philosophical debates about free will, and because the doer is, I don't know, there's a lot of perspective about that, and it's the most, once you break it, it's really it's really liberation. But why is it difficult to go deeper to the realization that there's no doer, that you're not a separate entity of life? Like, I don't know why, what makes it, they call it hypnosis. You're hypnotized with how the world is so real, and you think you're a separate controller of life doing it. I don't know, what do you think blocks that realization of no doership?
That's a great question, because that's one of the key questions, isn't it? If you can understand that and you're seeking, then it can help you break that, as you say. Ramesh Balsakar uses that word hypnosis, divine hypnosis, doesn't he? But it's, you say, why, the question is, why is it difficult to break the illusion that I am the doer? There's this strong sense that I am the doer, that I am a separate person, that I am somehow authoring or thinking my thoughts, that I'm somehow authoring or initiating my actions.
Yeah,
If
because
not,
I might forgot, I'm sorry. Like, I was reading I think it was earlier this morning or yesterday, I was reading a forum about this, about free will and predetermination or no doership, something like people exchanging ideas about it. Like some people would say thoughts come, but you choose which thought you or you have option, you have free will to, it's God's gift, those, there's a lot of birthing of concepts of about it. And then what I noticed was a lot of people really fight tooth and nail that they have free will, that they control their destiny, that they have this it's fascinating. I don't know. That's why I asked, and
Mm,
that's why I thought of it earlier. I might want to ask you, why is it so
yeah.
difficult to break the non-doership reality?
Well, there are two slightly different points you've just brought up. One is, as I see it anyway, as I've interpreted what you said. One is, I can imagine the scenario where somebody's a seeker, somebody's interested in non-duality, somebody has heard that there is no doership, for example, or there is no separate self, for example, or the notion that I am the body mind is an illusion, a fiction. They've heard this kind of teaching, yeah, and they want to see the truth of it for themselves. Yeah? This is one group of people. People who have heard this kind of teaching, non-dual type teaching, no separation type teaching, comes in many different forms. And they earnestly and genuinely want to see the truth of that for themselves. But yet the sense of separation is so difficult to see through for them. That's one thing we can talk about. Then you've got another group of people who are identified with the body mind, and they're also attached to the ideology that they have free will. And that's very important to them for whatever reason. And then there can be a separate question. Why are these people, and we're not saying they're wrong at the moment, we might go on to say they're wrong, but at this point in the questioning, we could pose the question, why are these people so attached, so rigidly attached, in your words, to that view, you see? And these are two, to me, these are two slightly different, they're related, they're two slightly different things. And they have two slightly different reasons why these things occur. Because in our first group, you've got seeker who's not attached to the idea of doership, but yet the sense of doership or the idea of doership or the belief they're the doer, the belief in separation keeps on arising time and time again and causes suffering. Because as you rightly say, when the belief in doership is truly seen through, because a lot of people say they've seen through the doer, but it hasn't really gone yet. There's still the attachment. Because when the doership is seen through, attachment to body mind is also gone. Some people have an attachment, they seem to have an attachment to body mind where they say, I am not the doer. But they still feel like they're the body mind, you see, which is actually still attachment to the doer, still attachment to the I'm the doer notion. They've seen through it partially. They've seen that, there is no actual control here. But at the same time, they still have this general belief that they still have this general identification on the body mind. And then the world will still feel real. But when the I'm the doer is truly seen fully, then the attachment to the body completely goes. Because what is left to attach to the body? Apart from the belief in separation, the belief of the ego, the sense of being separate. When the attachment to the body goes, then the world reveals itself as an illusion. But the question was that those people want to see the truth of that, but they can't. And that's because of the stickiness, the pervasiveness of what I call ignorance, of what in Buddhism and Vedanta they call ignorance or delusion or illusion. It's actually easy to see through. It's actually very easy to see through, especially once you've done it. It might sound silly thing to say. It's like inventing the wheel. Human beings live for thousands and thousands and thousands of years without the wheel being invented. But once they invented the wheel, it's easy. Anyone can make a wheel. A 5-year-old child can make a wheel. It's not actually difficult, but it feels very, very difficult. And there are reasons for that, and we can talk about that if you want. But then again, you've got this other group who are, and they're attached to their ideology. I have free will, maybe because it says so in a certain book or in a certain tradition, it tells me this, or my society told me this. There are a whole load of reasons. They're usually based upon fear and identity. And they're reasons why people cling to ideologies. And my view is we shouldn't try and take ideologies away from other people if it's helping them and supporting them in some way, because we all are at different stages, and what is helpful to me might not be helpful to you, and vice versa. And what is true for me now may not, or what is right for me now may not be right for you now. And what works for me may not be the right thing for you. So it's important, I think, we don't impose our own kind of journey and our own philosophy and our own insights onto other people when it may not be what's right for them, you know. And when I look through my own journey, when I was going through the self-help stage, well, and I was going through my new age phase, well, that was right for me at that time. You know, I learned from them, and I'm glad I did them. And I went through a tarot card phase. Well, I love my tarot card. I still love tarot cards, by the way. I think they're beautiful. You know, and but that was a wonderful exploration for me. You know, I wouldn't have listened to somebody, and in a way, I shouldn't have listened to somebody who told me, "Oh, don't bother with tarot cards; they're a waste of time." No, I like tarot cards. You know, they're beautiful. I learned a lot from them, and that's a part of my journey. And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Actually, when I look back at my journey, also like I what I realized was everybody, even the new age or religion or psychotherapy, I just realized they're saying the same thing with different languaging. Like they use a different they use different language at this at that caters a specific seeker, whatever, or at someone that can help a specific body mind organisms at specific, like it doesn't, like there's really no, everybody's just saying the same thing. Like everybody's, but with different variations maybe.
Mm.
That's what I realized. So I guess that's just, so the resistance fell off when things get clearer. But to be honest, there are still things that are left to be seen. But I what happened to me was I was just open to possibility. Like maybe last week I could say, the Zen concept of the great cessation, where
Mm.
you're satisfied with the mystery without having to seek whatever that mystery is. Like I stopped reading my books, and then the next week I was devouring books of Nisargadatta. And then I don't know where that energy is coming from. And then the next week I felt like I don't want to listen to anything. I'm just following that,
Yes,
whatever that
yes.
flow is.
It's your seeking energy, Leonard. That's what it is. It's the seeking energy still there, and it's natural. And what it is that there's still a part of you that's looking for answers, and that's why sometimes you're looking through silence, sometimes you're looking through books. That's my sense. One thing is that I mean, I think we can say that all of life, in a way, is all pointing into the same direction. It's all pointing us towards liberation. But if we take each individual teaching, I don't think they're all saying the same thing, even though maybe in an ultimate sense, life is always pushing us towards liberation, we can say. What I have found is that very few teachings, very few, really lay out the path to liberation in a way that actually works, first of all, and in a way that is lasting. Because there's some teachings that are very good at sort of arousing and awakening. And I've noticed that, a lot of these sort of newer, what people call neo-Advaita or radical non-duality, they can be good for some people, arousing some kind of awakening, some kind of realization that there's no essential character here. But what they're not very good at doing is creating or enabling that to drop away permanently. The sense of separation drop away permanently. So people have this kind of flip-flopping or oscillation between insight and maybe confusion and suffering. And they have this oscillation between clear seeing and unclear seeing, you know? And this oscillation between clear seeing and unclear seeing is actually still a movement of ego. It's still a movement of suffering. Something has genuinely been seen through, though. There's been a genuine awakening of some kind, a genuine insight has arisen. But this is still a movement of egotism. And very few teachings really understand the depth of this, as far as I can tell, from what I've come across. And very few teachings actually provide a solution. And this is why I think that I and we are so blessed to have Ramana's teachings. Because there may be other teachings that do the similar job, but I can vouch for Ramana's teachings as being just wonderfully holistic. And they work, they're practical, they work, they're simple, they're easy once you understand them, and they lead to a lasting fulfillment in which there's no confusion, in which confusion and clarity don't come and go. Because as I said, this oscillation of confusion and clarity is actually a form of suffering. It's actually a form of suffering. It's a subtle form of suffering. But if you're a seeker, this subtle form of suffering can become quite unbearable and frustrating. And but it's important for us to be in touch with that suffering, because that urges us to seek. And it's important that as long as the ignorance is there, there is some kind of desire to seek for that ignorance and not pretend, oh, it's not there, I don't need to seek. Some people pretend, oh, it's, it's just what's happening or something. But then they shut off the opportunity to discover more. But when you're in touch with that suffering, which is seeking, which is confusion and insight, alternating, when you're in touch with that suffering, it compels you to look. And in that looking, there's an opportunity for a deeper seeing, a deeper knowing, in which, and when I say deeper seeing, deeper knowing, is actually deeper falling away. There's a deeper falling away of false beliefs. That's what I mean by knowing. When the false beliefs fall away at a deeper and deeper level, it's like a sense of knowingness or presence is strengthened. That knowingness and presence or beingness that is strengthened is your true nature, your own beingness. This is what I call Ramana in my heart. It's always there. It's what we are, we could say. And it's what everything is. But it seems not to be there when we're enamored with objective phenomena, such as our thinking, our concepts, the world, and all our problems. But if you look deeply, you'll see the only way suffering can really fall away is when all these apparent problems in the world are not actually real. If they're all super real, then the suffering doesn't end. Because these problems are all here. But it has to be genuine seeing, not just conceptual, not the mind saying, oh, it's an illusion, and then that's a self-defense mechanism. Whereas when the insight's there, it's like, oh my gosh, oh wow. There's that film Inception, that Leonardo DiCaprio film Inception, that deals with this point. Because at the end, there's a bit of an ambiguity at the end of the film. Have you seen that film?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it looks like, one character is kind of, trying to deny life or get away from life or something. But actually, at the end of the film, the question mark is, oh, is this character actually in line with the reality? And our main character, the main protagonist, is actually the one who's been living in illusion the whole time. That's the kind of question mark, if I remember correctly.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I watched it like maybe years ago. I
Yeah, so
I have to rewatch it to see the insight. Like it's you mentioned a lot of good points there where it can be a bypassing.
yeah,
I watched one of your videos where you said the ego can pretend to be the policeman
yeah,
catching the thief, or the thief pretending to be the thief pretending to be the policeman. And
yeah.
it was actually the thief itself. You think
That's
you're
typically what happens. I see it so often. You know, when people come to me, um, when people approach me for a one-to-one meeting, or they come to my satsangs, where the ego mind is, I say, it's like the thief pretending to be the policeman, and then the policeman comes up to you and says, "Hey, everybody, I've caught the thief. You can all relax now." And everyone in the community goes, "Yay, we've caught the thief!" And they invite the policeman, and they have a party with the policeman, but it's just the thief dressed up as the policeman. So it's a thief pretending to be the policeman, saying he's caught the thief. And what happens? There's more. The ego is still there, and
hmm,
that's the basic reason why that first group of people we spoke about earlier, those people who are seeking and genuinely trying to see it and understand these teachings, they can't. Is because that you have to understand what the ego is and how it works and how it keeps on coming back. Because if you clearly see that, and you clearly see through the ego, clearly see how false it is, then it doesn't come back, or it doesn't come back so easily. Because you've seen the primary mechanism by which it keeps on reasserting itself. Okay. That's one thing, understanding. The second thing, which is what Ramana really, I think he really understood very, very deeply, or beyond deeply, because it's beyond, you know, it's beyond words, really. It's beyond talking about in this kind of way. But I'll say what he understood really deeply. Again, he's not an individual to understand something. It doesn't work like that, actually. But I'll just use these words. What he understood very, very deeply was that there's a practical method to remove the ego. There's a practical method to remove the ego. And you can have as much understanding as you like. You can have much insight, much knowledge. But there's an energetic component to the ego. In Sanskrit, the word is vasana. The vasanas, which is your tendency, habitual tendency to keep on identifying as a body-mind entity, to keep on thinking, I am a person, I am Tom, I am Leonard, whatever your name is. And that habitual energy keeps on coming back and reasserting itself. And unless a teaching deals with that, it will not work for 99.99% of seekers. There may be exceptions. If they're vasanas, if they're egoic vasanas, the tendency to identify as me is not very strong for some reason, then maybe it will just go. But for most people, we've got into a very, very bad habit, which is this thinking I'm a body mind, believing I'm a separate person. And when you go into it and you question it, you can realize, oh, I'm not a separate person. You know? And on a Monday, for example, on Monday, you can go into it, you can explore it, you can set the whole day aside, you can look into it, you can realize, oh my gosh, there's no evidence for separation. But by the time Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday come along, the habitual tendency to identify as a person has come back. And so you're back into the confusion again. Even though on Monday you saw through it all and it was all clear, by the time Tuesday or Wednesday has come, you're back in it again, you see. So this is the utility of a practice. And this is usually why most people need a practice. And it's not because we're trying to create something new. It's because there's an energetic or habitual tendency, a momentum that keeps on coming back. And unless you deal with that, unless the teaching deals with that, you'll find it doesn't work. Which means it might produce an awakening. On Monday, you had that awakening, you had that insight, but it won't produce liberation. And you tend not to get the bliss aspect of the teaching, the happiness aspect, and the love aspect of the teaching tends not to come through. Because it's only when it becomes permanent, then when the ego is really come away at its root, so even energetically it can't rise again, that the bliss, the happiness, the bliss, and the love, in Sanskrit the word is ananda, which means happiness or bliss, and love comes through, and we realize that this is one with what we are. And this is where the teachings go from something dry and intellectual and maybe sort of unemotional or lacking in feeling. This is when the teachings go from sort of something quite dry or sterile to full of heart. This is what the divinity, the divine, and love, and devotion, bhakti. In Sanskrit, bhakti means love, devotion. This is where the sort of mind and the heart come together, the intellect and the love kind of, it's beyond that. It's beyond that as well. It's way beyond that, really. But this is where the ananda aspects of the teachings come in. This is where it goes beyond the individual. Until then, it's really still from an individual perspective. You might say there's no one here, or there's nothing happening or whatever, but it's still from an individual perspective. There's still like a sense somehow that there's a body, that there's some kind of individual perspective there. Whereas it's only when that completely falls away at the root that that individual perspective is transcended and the love comes in. And this is what Ramana was saying. And this is the ancient teaching. The Buddha said the same thing. The Buddha had the same teaching, basically, in different words. The Vedanta teachings, they teach the same thing. The Upanishads teach the same thing. And Ramana teaches it too, in his own beautiful way. And he makes it so simple. That's what I love about it. You know, well, what I love about it is because I've fallen in love with him, so I'm totally biased. But he does make it so simple. And he gives you a method by which you can remove the ego, and it stays removed. And some people say, well, look, if you're applying a method, then you're just perpetuating yourself, the doer. But the beauty, this is a unique method that doesn't do that, you see. I mean, do you think he didn't realize that if you apply a method, you're going to perpetuate this ego? Of course he realized that. So these teachings, they don't perpetuate the ego. And I would say it's a belief. Most people don't realize this. Well, some people don't realize this. It's a belief to say that practices perpetuate the doer or perpetuate the ego. It's a belief. Because actually, if you try some practices, they don't perpetuate the ego. They actually lessen the ego. And in the case of self-inquiry, if you understand how to do it, it removes the ego. So we're very blessed to have this technology. But unfortunately, without it, without applying that technology, often what will happen is suffering will continue. The individual perspective will continue. The ego thief will have pretended to be the policeman and said, hey, I've got it. I've figured it out. There's no one here. There's nothing happening. But it's still the ego. The suffering is still there. The seeking is still there. That's what I see anyway. That's my perspective.
No, it's actually I got a lot from that, from that perspective. What I just noticed about from personal experience is let's say the day is going smooth. Let's use the word smooth, or
Yeah,
things
whatever.
happen. Let you're going for a walk in the park, or you're buying some stuff in the grocery. It's easy to notice it. But let's say you're somebody you love died, or a crisis hits, or an anger arises. That's where the ego is really, I don't know, it's really difficult. This is just for me. It's just, or when the anxiety it's really, it feels like embracing the, it's hard to notice the that you're not the body. It feels so strong.
Yeah, totally.
You know.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that's exactly it. When you're on a retreat and there's no responsibilities, and you know you're doing hatha yoga every morning, It's easy sometimes to see these things. And when you're at satsang, or you're in a meeting, or you're walking through the park and you're reading a non-dual book or something, you know, non-dual poetry, that's, or, you know, something like that. It's like, oh yes, you know, everything's beautiful, everything's wonderful, there's no one here. But then you're right, when something, and it could be whatever, it varies from person to person what these sorts of things are. But when something stressful happens in your life, then suddenly all this sort of wisdom that you may have had, a lot of it can disappear. And that's exactly what I'm talking. And that's what life does. Life will keep on giving you these stressful situations until you see this. Because life is trying to teach you. Ramana is teaching you. Ramana is trying to teach you. Don't stop. Don't stop seeking. You need to look further. You need to look deeper. You don't believe me? I'm going to make you suffer. And God will make you suffer until you go deeper and deeper and end your suffering at the root. Now, the reason the suffering comes back at those stressful times is because it hasn't been cut off at the root. You see? There has been genuine insight, yes. Genuine seeing, yes. But not at the root. When it's cut off at the root, it doesn't come back ever. It never comes back. Yeah? This is why all the scriptures say doesn't come back. Once suffering goes, it doesn't come back. It's cut off at the root. It can't come back. You know, some people say it's like a burnt rope. If you burn a rope, you can't use it now to tie anything with. It's burnt. It's like ashes. It looks like if you've seen a burnt rope on the ground, it looks like a rope still. But if you pick it up, it just disintegrates in your hand. See, it doesn't come back. The suffering, the egotism, is impossible. Just there's no way for it to happen. It's irrevocable. So what Ramana teaches us is that we need to cut suffering off at the root. Until we do that, we will never be truly 100% happy. And because suffering can always come back in the future. And then we're always going to be worried about that. Plus, you haven't really seen through the I am the body-mind illusion and the world is real illusion. The illusion that the world is real, the illusion that the body-mind is you. Yeah, that hasn't been fully seen through. And until that's fully seen through, there'll always be dissatisfaction. There'll always be some suffering, and that will make us seek. So we should seek, but we should seek. What Ramana teaches us is how to seek in an effective way. There's some people say, I've been working really, really hard. I've been doing loads and loads of work. But then you think to yourself, well, it's not just about doing lots and lots of work. You have to work effectively. You've got to work intelligently. You've got to apply yourself in the correct way. If you do lots and lots of work, but you've applied yourself in an incorrect or unintelligent way, you're not going to make that much progress. So Ramana just directs us onto the true path, the direct path, where we are seeking. If we believe we're a body mind, we'll be seeking. But how to direct that energy in an efficient and intelligent way that maximizes our chance of success. In fact, guarantees us success. Guarantees us success if we do it. So, it sounds like a tall claim, but this is the teaching, and it works. It's very effective. But you have to cut off egotism at the root, must. Otherwise, there's always a potential for it to come back.
Yeah. And Maya is always pulling you back to that. Like,
of course.
On Tuesday, your boss, the bills, and then everything.
Yeah.
And then how
yes.
you wouldn't notice you're already caught up in the problems of how am I going to pay this? What will happen to this? And then there's this pandemic, and then there's this and this, and then it's going to bombard you with different stuff, right?
Yes.
That's the nature of Maya.
That's the nature of Maya. And it's so interesting if you look at people's lives from across the world. whether they're the richest people in the world or not, everyone's got problems. Everyone's got stress, you know. Because when you think you're the body mind, even if you've got lots of money and your bills are all paid and everything's fine, and you've got a great family and you know your relationships are all good, eventually, you see, your body will fail you. Your body will eventually become unhealthy and die. And not only that, same with all the people you love and care about. You know, your nearest and dearest, your friends, your family, they too, at some point, unfortunately, their bodies will also fail, and they will become unhappy. I mean, unwell, and or die. And this is stressful. This is stressful. You know, to have you, for most people, if you're attached to your body mind, it's stressful.
Yeah,
And Maya will always have a hold on you. But Maya is non-existent. She doesn't really exist. And this is the magic. This is her magic. This is her the mystery of Maya. How it can seem so strong. You know, so strong, so powerful. Maya seems so powerful, so strong. Ignorance seems so powerful, so strong. The sense of egotism, the sense I'm the body mind, the sense of doership seems so powerful, so strong, until it's gone, or until it's seen through. And then it's like, it's nothing. It was like a silk thread. You can just break it. It's gone. It wasn't even there. And this is the power of the illusion. You know, it's so strong until it isn't. It's not strong at all. It's flimsy. It's weak, but it seems strong. Because when you're entrapped in Maya, which is essentially your own thinking, Maya is actually your own thinking. And when you're entrapped in your own thinking, then, which is what we're all trapped by if we're ignorant. We're listening to our thoughts constantly. Then we will continue to suffer. Because in every single one of our thoughts, if there's ignorance there, our thoughts are like a glass of water. You've got to imagine a glass of water that's nice and clear. If there's ignorance, it's like getting a drop of black ink, one drop, and just putting a drop of black ink into the glass of water. And the whole water now is just full of ink. And every single thought that we have, if this glass of water represents our mind and our thinking, every thought we have is now tainted and tinged and stained with ego. Ego is the I am the body idea, or I am the body mind idea. The concept, I am the body mind. And you might notice inside that concept, I am the body mind, is also the concept, I am the doer, I'm the thinker. Because if you think I am the body mind, then you're also thinking, I am the doer, I am the thinker. So the I am the body mind contains the doership concept inside it. Every single one of your thoughts will be tainted by I am the doer. Even if it doesn't, or I am the body mind, even if it doesn't say I'm the body mind, it will be there. Ignorance will be there in every thought. And then how do we approach spiritual teachings? How are we trying to explore spirituality? For most people, it's through the mind. Yeah? Whether you're doing meditation, whether you're doing yoga, whether you're reading books, whether you're going to meetings, you're always thinking about it. Oh, I'm thinking about what meditation to do. I'm thinking about what book to read, you know? So this is why it's so difficult, is because we're so used to relying on our minds to discover things. Because in the everyday world, let's say, that's how we operate. We use the mind to navigate the world. You know, okay, I've got some bills to pay. Well, you're thinking about bills, and you're thinking about how to pay them. So that's using your mind to pay the bills. That's good. That's a practical, good use of the mind. You know, if you want to meet somebody at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so you can go out with them or have a business meeting, whatever it is, you're using your mind to arrange a time and meet up with them and you know, arrange your calendar. That's a good use of the mind. It's a practical use of the mind. But with spirituality, all these thoughts are also tinged or tainted with ignorance, with the I am the body mind idea. So we cannot rely on our thinking, unfortunately. And we don't know what else to do. It's like, well, how is it? I can't rely on my thinking? No, you can't, because your thinking is already a part of the illusion. It's already been captured by Maya, so to speak. So if you're using your thinking to try and get out of this, that's the ego pretending to be the policeman. You think, oh, how can I get out of this? But that's the ego pretending to be the policeman. You see, very subtle. I'll give you a couple of examples just to make it clearer. If you're thinking to yourself, oh, I really want a cup of coffee right now. Yeah. What you're actually saying is, I am the body mind. I, the body mind, would like a cup of coffee. If you're saying, oh, I'm worried about these bills, what you're really saying is, I'm the body mind. And I, the body mind, am worried about these bills. Even if you don't use the word I in your thinking, if you say, I don't know, let's get some fish and chips to eat. You're really saying, I am the body mind, and I'm suggesting, let's go and get some fish and chips to eat. So every thought you have contains within it the I am the body mind idea. And this is the problem. This is why it's so difficult to get rid of. And unless a teaching deals with that, and from what I can see, the large majority of teachings out there do not deal with it at all. Even like a lot of the Vedanta teachings, Buddhist teachings, they're not dealing with it at that level. Maybe I'm mistaken, because I don't look at all the spiritual teachings nowadays, so I'm not so up to date. When I was seeking, I used to know all the spiritual teachings out there. Now, I'm not so up to date with it all. But from what I've seen, I haven't seen many teachings that really show how to uproot ego at the root, apart from rare teachings like Ramana's.
Yeah, that's very subtle. The coffee example. It's
Okay?
subtle. Like when something thoughts come up, you follow it right away.
Yeah. And you can look, you can see, you can check if what I'm saying is true. Is what Tom's saying true? And you can look at your thoughts and you can see, is there egotism there? And you'll see almost every single thought you have, the I'm the body mind idea is there. And this is what Ramana says in his text, To Who Am I? Ramana wrote some very short texts. I don't know if you read them before. Have you read them?
Maybe before when I was devouring the books.
Well, he wrote very little. But what he wrote was most of them are very short texts. There's a text called Who Am I, which is very concise, but it contains the whole teaching in just about 11 or 12 pages. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And it's one of those texts, when I first read it, I thought, why has he written that? You don't need to write that. Or why has he written this? You don't need to write this. And as my journey progressed, I realized every single sentence in that text has a purpose. There's not too much, there's not too little. It's just what you need. And in that text, he says, only after the I thought, he calls it the I thought, which is the I'm the body mind idea. Only after the I thought has arisen, do other thoughts arise. Because our ignorance, all our thoughts are tainted by ignorance. It's very subtle, it's very difficult to understand the teachings. And as I said, when I first came across them, I rejected them. But when you apply them, you start to see the truth of it.
Yeah, and suffering diminishes.
Suffering diminishes until it goes. That's the power of the technique of self-inquiry that he teaches, self-inquiry.
Yeah.
And it's a very deep technique. It's a technique that doesn't perpetuate the ego. It doesn't perpetuate the sense of doership. And it's the only real way of ending ignorance. Actually, you don't have to do it the way Ramana says you should do it, and it could be called something else. Another teaching might not call it self-inquiry; they might call it something else. But it's you have to do that. You have to go through that process, as far as I can see. Um, you know,
Yeah.
but it
It
goes by many names, and different traditions have pointed it out in different ways.
hmm,
It's the same basic teaching, but very few people teach it.
yeah. I was drawn to Robert Adams earlier. Maybe I was 26 when I was 25 or 26. He's saying leave the world alone. He's just saying leave the world alone. It's something like that. I don't know. It's really it's yeah. It's really the ego is really subtle. I think my last question is, I don't know. I haven't asked this in other interviews. This is my first time asking it because I don't know. I'm. It's not intentional. It's been hanging at the back of my. It's been hanging, but I feel like this is the right timing because at the end of self realization, one realizes there's no person who realizes it. It just happened. So it means everything is like the ignorance, the ego. Like people would say thoughts happen, but don't believe it. Like don't swallow it. Don't catch it. Don't stick it to your identity. But isn't it that the identity is really not existent? So who's doing that? Who's
Mm.
attaching? Is it what I don't know if I'm gonna follow the logic of mind. Of course, mind is just trying to maze itself in a loop.
No, no, no. That you've asked a logical question. From what I can tell, your question basically is, if there's no one there, then who's attaching to all these thoughts?
Yeah, and
Is that
and
right?
yeah, and my theory is everything is God's theater. It like the movie has been already. The script is already written, and it will just play out the way
Oh,
life
but then,
wants it to
but
something.
are you just, aren't you just now coming up with another theory, a concept?
Yeah, it's a theory.
So that's fine. You can have a theory. That's fine. Nothing wrong with a theory, as long as you recognize it's just a theory. Because what we're looking for is not a theory, really. We're looking for something that's deeper than that. Something that's a truth that is realized deep, deep within us. Let's say. So it's undeniable, and it's not a theory. It's a reality. Do you see? So it's fine to have theories, no problem, as long as we don't start to think that they're real. Those theories, they're just concepts of the mind. So let me ask you again: is your question basically, what is it that's being attached that thinks it's the body
Yeah.
mind if there
What
is no
what
one?
what is it that's believing the thought? If the believing of the thought is also a thought, then it's just all thoughts doing its whatever.
Yeah, there are a couple of things. I like what you just said. The last thing you just said. There are a couple of things. One thing you mentioned is that some people say, "Don't pay attention to the thoughts." Don't go with the thoughts. Yeah. Um, the problem is how to actually do that. Sorry, excuse me. I'm just going to. Because as we said, the thoughts keep on saying, "I'm a body mind, I'm a body mind, I'm a body mind, I'm a body mind." Even the thoughts that don't say that explicitly or obviously, the "I'm the body mind" idea is within them. Yeah. Even those thoughts that are just harmless, harmless thoughts contain with them ignorance. Because all our thoughts are stained with this ignorance, if we're ignorant. So someone might say, well, listen, don't pay attention to your thoughts. Well, have you ever tried that? And you see what happens to most people when they try that? They can do it for like a minute or 5 minutes or a certain amount of time. And then before you know it, thoughts come back again and they're back on that train of thought, you see. So there's a practical method to it. And that's self-inquiry. Self-inquiry is a practical method to take you out of ignorance. It's practical because you can do it. And it's practical because it works. And people have been doing it for thousands of years. Not hundreds of years, thousands of years. The teachings basically haven't changed. The essential Vedanta teachings haven't changed for hundreds and hundreds of years because they work. And they're the most direct path that I think is possible. That might sound a bit arrogant to some people maybe, but it's like, say you've got 2 points and you have to travel from one point to another point. The quickest way is in a straight line. Yeah, that's just the quickest way. Every other way is going to be a slight detour. The straight line is the quickest way. Now, someone could say, well, that's arrogant of you. How dare you say that you know the best way? Well, I'm saying, well, I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm just trying to show you that the quickest way between 2 points, straight line. That's just the way it is. I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything. It's just the way I see it. And similarly, when you understand Ramana's teachings, he's just giving you a direct path to liberation. It's the most direct path. It's the tried and tested path, and it works. And it's been around for a long time because it works. The problem is, it's not always acceptable to the mind. The mind doesn't like it. The mind is your ego. Your ego is Maya and ignorance. So we're using this ego, Maya, ignorance, to navigate the spiritual world. If we can trust the Guru's teachings, if we can trust Ramana's teachings and trust that what he's telling us is true and follow them, then we'll find liberation comes quickly. In my case, I didn't trust his teachings. Yeah, but I fell in love with him. And falling in love with him drew me to his teachings. And then liberation came. You see? But what will happen is that life will make you suffer and suffer and suffer until you discover this for yourself, until it will force you to come to this way of seeing things eventually. Maybe sooner, maybe later. But at some point you've got to come to this self-inquiry type teaching, or the same basic process. If it's not through Ramana, it doesn't matter. If it's not through Vedanta, it doesn't matter. But the same mechanics, let's say, the same process has to be gone through. So your question was, what is it that's been attached? Well, it is thinking. You are right. There is no attachment apart from thought. So it's thinking that thinks it is attached. So who is attached? Who identifies with the body-mind? Thinking attached to body-mind. It's just thought. Says, I am attached. I think I'm the body-mind. There is no real attachment or identification with body-mind. Who identifies with the body-mind? No one. It's just thinking, saying, I'm a person, and I'm attached to the body-mind. But there's no real attachment to the body-mind. This is why I said Maya is actually non-existent. The problem is, we keep on coming back to our thinking. Shall I tell you something that thinking loves to do? Thinking loves to think. Thinking loves to think. It loves to carry on thinking. It loves to toy with itself, entertain itself, talk to itself, play with itself, engage with itself. You see? It does everything it can to continue itself. And this ignorance, this belief on the body-mind only exists within thought. It doesn't really exist in any actual way. The problem is we keep on coming back to our thoughts. So then the teaching says, well, let's ignore your thoughts. Well, how do you do that? Again, self-inquiry gives us a methodology. some methods will help us come out of our thoughts for a while, a short while. Like you can do breath work, you can chant a mantra. In Who Am I, Sri Ramana mentions this. He mentions other methods will help you for a short time, but then when you end the method, you'll come back to your thinking again. The suffering will come back again. You do your breathing meditation, you'll feel nice and peaceful and calm. You have the insights. You go to satsang, you go to a meeting, you have your insights. But then when the meeting ends, or when the breathing meditation ends, or when the mantra, and then you've got to pay your bills, or you've got the stressful situation, it all comes back. This is why he says the only adequate means is self-inquiry. And then he shows you how to do it. So fine, ignore your thoughts. That's the good teaching. But how do you do that? And who does that? Because aren't you thinking about how do I ignore my thoughts? And you're already in your thoughts. So
it's always going to be checkmate with the mind. It will never go so far. It will just keep you, and you think
yeah,
you won the game. You're just decorating the chessboard with all the fancy stuff in it.
yeah, that's right. The ego pretends the thinking mind pretends that it's you. You know. So if you're having a thought, you think, "Oh, I'm having that thought." No, you're not. It's ego having that thought. So when you think, "Oh, I want," if you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, I want liberation," that's not true. That's the ego telling you. You say it's speaking, and it makes you think that it's you. Have I said that right? Yeah. It makes you think that the ego is you. So you think, "Oh, I'm thinking I want liberation," but it's actually the ego tricking you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You posted this last week, I guess. The trick that the ego does to.
The only trick the ego ever has. I posted that video, didn't I?
Yeah.
The only trick the ego ever has. That's the one.
Mm.
Yeah. I
It's
posted another video today. What was it? The problem with 99.9% of spiritual teachings.
ah, yes.
A
I
bit of clickbait, there, but you can check it out.
yeah. It's I don't know. It's really been great having this exchange, and it's I know I was just noticing the emotion. The I don't know. Earlier it has a lot of questions, and then towards the end it starts. I know there's some unspoken understanding, but there's also like a relief that there's always a way. There's always a way out of ignorance or whatever that means. Like when you said it's skillful inquiry, if it's skillful inquiry, because I've tried everything, even that I even did like a 1 hour like excerpts of all the sat songs, and I put like music in the background, and I listen to it and I listen to it. So but if there's no skillful inquiry, it still wouldn't go to the roots. That's the gist of what I got today. Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
for your time.
you're welcome. You're very welcome indeed.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna ask also you if people want to connect with you or want to maybe see the things you post, maybe your website or your satsang schedules.
Yeah.
Maybe you can
Yeah.
also say it.
Okay, so I've got a website, tomdas.com. You can contact me through there. I've got meetings twice a week online on Thursdays and Sundays, 8 p.m. on Thursday, 3 p.m. on Sunday UK time at the moment. You're very welcome to come along. There's Zoom meetings. Um, Yeah, and I do one. I at the moment when I can, if I have time, I will offer one-to-one meetings with people. Sometimes I'm not able to do it just because I don't have time. But if I have time, so do contact me and if you'd like to have a one-to-one. Some people prefer that, especially when we're discussing personal matters. A lot of what I do on one-to-ones is when people have some issues like psychological issues or personal issues or relationship issues, or some people have been spiritual seekers for a long time and they're not really progressing. So I often have one-to-ones with these sorts of people. We can usually, most of the time, we can figure out where the blocks are and just, sort them out. So I do a lot of that on one-to-one meetings. But come to satsang, look at some videos online on YouTube if you want. You can see what you think. What I'll say though is that because the only way the seeker really knows how to approach non-duality is through the mind, is actually approaching non-duality through ignorance. So my experience is actually without a teacher, and in my case, Ramana. And I recommend, I encourage everybody to go towards Ramana, as they take Ramana as their teacher, as their guru, if they want to. But without his kind of teaching, or this kind of teaching, and having some kind of faith in it, it's very difficult to break through because you're using your mind to try and understand things, and your mind is the ignorance, or it's tainted with ignorance. So you can't see it with the mind. Now the mind will at times tell you, "Oh, I've seen it, I've got it, I've seen it, I've got it," but then you'll find it's limited. It'll go, and it'll keep on making you pretend you're progressing. You see, but without the teaching of a guru, and I'm not saying you have to follow anyone or like join a cult or anything like that. No, nothing like that. But without a sort of true teaching from that comes from a different perspective, an enlightened perspective, and without following that, it's very difficult to break through because the instrument you're using to look at is distorted with egotism and ignorance and the separation. That's the problem. So yeah, if you'd like to join me, and anyone listening would like to join me, then yeah, you can contact me on tomdas.com. There's a contact section, a list of the events are there. Or just turn up to a meeting with satsang. Very happy to chat. Is that okay, Leonard?
Yes, sure. Yeah, thank you so much. It's really been good, awesome listening to these. It's a fresh perspective for me. Although I may have heard it before, but like your story earlier, if the mind is clouded with projection and baggages, it wouldn't hear, it wouldn't hear it right away. But right now, it's fresh to me. What everything you said, really, thank you so much. Yeah, have a good day. Bye.
Thanks so much, Leonard. Have a great day. You take care. Bye bye.